Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the invisible economy that actually runs the natural world. We're going to look past the beautiful scenery and dive into the strict, fundamental laws of energy that fuel and literally limit every single living thing on Earth. Let's get into it.
I want you to picture a biological mystery for a second. When you look at a sprawling meadow or a dense forest, what's the first thing you notice? You see millions upon millions of blades of grass, countless trees, just a massive abundance of plants. But if you look up, well, you'd be lucky to spot just one single hawk circling in the sky. Or out in a vast wilderness, you might find only a tiny handful of wolves roaming across hundreds of miles. So why is that? Why is the natural world totally dominated by plants while top predators are so incredibly rare? It's a striking imbalance, and the answer is completely driven by energy. So, to solve the mystery of this missing energy, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at chains versus tangled food webs. Second, we'll break down the 10% energy rule. Third, reading the three pyramids. And finally, the true cost of metabolism.
Okay, part one, chains versus tangled food webs. You know, it's time we challenge that overly simplistic, straight-line idea of who eats whom. A lot of times we talk about food chains, just a single, straight path of energy transfer. Grass is eaten by a rabbit, the rabbit is eaten by a fox. It's clean, it's simple, but honestly, it's not really the whole truth. Nature is incredibly complex and highly biodiverse. A much more accurate representation of reality is a food web. A food web is basically a bunch of interacting food chains totally tangled together. It shows this vast array of feeding relationships that give an ecosystem its stability and its biodiversity.
Just look at how beautifully chaotic a real food web is. We've got plants down at the bottom branching out to rabbits, squirrels, mice, insects, and birds. And then those are connected to spiders, toads, snakes, and finally, your hawks and foxes at the top. But here is the absolutely crucial point. I want you to pay close attention to the arrows. Those arrows don't just point to who is doing the eating, they represent the actual flow of energy. They track the chemical energy that was originally stored in the bonds of glucose, moving from one organism straight into the cells of another.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 10% energy rule. As energy moves along those arrows, it takes a massive hit. Are you ready for a pretty staggering statistic? 90%. A massive 90% of the energy an organism consumes is utilized or completely lost at every single step of the food chain. No way around it. That means when a rabbit eats a plant, it absolutely does not get to keep 100% of that plant's energy for its own growth. It loses 90% of it right off the bat.
So, where on earth does all that energy go? Well, it vanishes into the basic biological costs of living. First up, cellular respiration. The bonds of glucose are broken down to transfer energy to ATP molecules, which fuel your basic life functions, just keeping the heart beating and the lungs breathing. Second is metabolism. Through cellular respiration and metabolic reactions, an enormous amount of this energy is converted into heat. It's used to maintain body temperature and is continuously, and I mean literally continuously, lost to the surrounding environment as heat energy. And finally, whatever isn't burned as heat or used for functions is often eliminated as physical waste. The universe always demands its tax, and it demands it mostly in the form of heat.
All right, Section 3, reading the three pyramids.
Because losing 90% of your energy at every step is such a dramatic drop, ecologists use specific visual tools to map out this draining economy layer by layer. We call them ecological pyramids. These are specialized diagrams representing the amount of energy, the amount of biomass, or the sheer numbers of individuals at each trophic or feeding level. These pyramids are the ultimate way to visualize why food chains rarely, if ever, go past a fourth-level consumer. There just simply isn't enough fuel left in the tank.
Let's start by looking at the pyramid of energy. At the very base, our primary producers, the plants, start with 100% of the available energy, which they brilliantly captured from the sun. But when the primary consumers like insects or rabbits eat them, they only get 10%. When the secondary consumers eat them, they only get 1%. And by the time you reach the third-level consumer, your apex predator at the top, they are receiving a minuscule 0.1% of the original energy. The rest has just bled out into the environment.
Now let's shift focus to the pyramid of biomass. This pyramid measures the actual amount of living tissue at each level, in grams of tissue per square meter. Think of this as the actual potential food that's available. Down at the base, you have 809 grams of producer tissue. But because of that harsh 90% energy loss we just talked about, that can only support 37 grams of primary consumers, which supports just 11 grams of secondary consumers, leaving a mere 1.5 grams of top predator tissue per square meter. The actual physical mass of life literally shrinks as you move up.
And finally, we have the pyramid of numbers. This perfectly explains our opening mystery. To support just one single third-level consumer, like our solitary hawk or a lone wolf, you need 90,000 secondary consumers. To support them, you need 200,000 primary consumers. And at the foundational base, you need an astonishing 1.5 million individual primary producers. There inherently has to be vastly more producers at the base just to prop up a single top predator because so much energy gets lost in transit.
Which brings us to Section 4, the cost of metabolism.
Let's connect this massive energy loss back to what actually physically remains for the next animal in line to eat. We need to clearly define a crucial term here: biomass. Biomass is the amount of organic molecules stored in cells and tissues that is actually available to be consumed by the next trophic level. Think of it like this. If an animal's daily energy expenditure is its living expenses, then its biomass is its savings account. It's the physical leftover organic matter of an organism after it has paid its harsh metabolic taxes.
Let's see how this all builds together. Down at the bottom, producers are working hard transforming light energy from the sun into chemical energy. But notice all those squiggly arrows pointing out and away at every single tier. That represents heat, the sheer, exhausting effort of just staying alive. Hunting, digesting, breathing, maintaining body heat, burns up almost all the energy before it can ever be passed on. Only the tiny fraction stored as bodily tissue, the biomass, actually makes it up the chain.
So it really all boils down to this. When you eat an organism, you are only eating the 10% of the energy that they stored for later use within their biomass. I really want to emphasize this because it grounds all this abstract science into something very real. Every meal you eat, every time a predator catches prey in the wild, they are only accessing that tiny 10% sliver of energy that the prey actually managed to save.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and honestly pretty humbling final thought. If 90% of energy is lost to heat and metabolism at every single step, how much sunlight and how many millions of plants are required at the base of the food web just to support one single hawk? Or, for that matter, to support you? The foundation required to sustain just a single top consumer on our planet is unimaginably vast. Thank you so much for exploring the hidden energy economy of nature with me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking deeper, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.